Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I know, I haven't posted in a while, and with good reason. I've been extremely busy with assignments and gym and trying to juggle my social life, but I have missed posting on YouTube because it was and still is a form of therapy for me. So I am going to try and post more often because despite what you guys might think, I do love posting on YouTube and I do want to make up for lost time. Today, I wanted to talk about a topic that I've put off for a while, and I'm not quite sure why. I've always wanted to make a video on this topic, but I just never got round to doing it, and that's missing black people and missing white woman syndrome. There are countless of stories about white children going missing or being abducted that we're constantly exposed to in the media, more specifically the news, the most famous case being Madeleine McCann. If you're unaware of the Madeleine McCann case, then you've been living under a rock or you don't reside in the UK, but for those who don't know, I'll give a brief summary of the case. So, Madeleine McCann went missing back in 2007 at the age of 3 from her holiday apartment in Portugal. Every year or every few years, they give frequent updates on the case and funding has gone into the Madeleine Trust. I used to be an avid watcher of crime documentaries, and I don't watch them as much as I did during my secondary school years, but I still do watch them occasionally every now and then. On these crime shows, they would mainly cover stories that involve white women going missing or being abducted, and this is something that completely flew past my head at the time because, as previously stated, I wasn't always woke. However, now I, and along with others, have started to recognize the preference that the media has towards covering stories that involve the disappearance of white children, more specifically little white girls with blonde hair and blue eyes. This phenomenon is known as missing white woman syndrome. A website from the University of Missouri Kansas City states that missing white woman syndrome is a term coined by the late PBS News anchor Gwen Ifill, refers to the mainstream media's seeming fascination with covering missing or endangered white women and its seeming disinterest in cases involving missing people of color, black people. As previously stated, I can name you many cases from the UK and overseas where stories about missing or abducted white women and girls have hit mainstream media. Of course, there's Madeleine McCann, Sarah Payne, April Jones, John Benet Ramsey, Elizabeth Smart, Elizabeth Fitzel, and so on. I don't think I can give the same number of examples of black girls or women who have gone missing whose stories have hit mainstream media, but there are many cases of black children going missing here in the UK that we don't talk about. So why is it that society prioritizes white women's safety over black women's safety? Why do we put in place legislations designed to protect women when something bad happens to white women? If you look back, since the beginning of cinematic history, we've been fed imagery of white women and their presumed fragility, mainly in the form of weaponizing it against black men. Films like Rosewood reflect this notion that white women are these debilitated creatures that need rescuing, specifically from black men. I remember reading an article that was written by one of my lecturers who, funny enough, is a white woman, and this article was about hate crime and the discussion surrounding who we as a public consider victims. And what was interesting about this article is that it stated that in order to be considered a victim in society's eyes, you need to be a part of a group that most people can sympathize with. And the article gave the example of Muslims. We all know that Muslims are subjected to religious hate crime, also known as Islamophobia, but because the religion Islam has been stigmatized in the media for years, specifically after the 9/11 attacks, the 7/7 bombings, and the Rigby, we see them as a threat to society, hence why they don't get sympathy from the public whenever they're subjected to hate crime. But if it was a Christian or a Jew, we would show more concern. This somewhat explains why we as a society prioritized endangered white women over black women. Everything negative has been associated with black people, and everything positive has been associated with white people. Black men are depicted as violent thugs in the media, and black women are depicted as angry, obnoxious, masculine baby mothers. Which is why when horrendous things happen to black people, we don't show concern. The case has to be horrific, or it has to be recorded in order for it to be taken seriously. So, the moral of the story is, if you are a part of a group that is seen as a threat in society's eyes, they don't care if something bad happens to you. We see it all the time in the media. The media humanizes white men whenever they're the perpetrators of heinous acts in the form of mental health, because it doesn't fit the narrative of white people being victims. In cases where black people are the victims, they'll find some way of sweeping it under the rug, or in some cases even justifying it. We've seen it whenever we talk about slavery. They tell us to forget about it and it happened so long ago. We talk about stop and search statistics. They'll tell us, well, it's not that we're racist, it's just most of the crime happens in those areas. An article from the BBC titled "Missing Black People: Study into Pattern of Discrimination Being Carried Out." The article said that a study is being carried out into whether there is a pattern of discrimination and racial bias when reporting a missing black person. Black people are 4 times more likely to be reported missing, but are the focus of disproportionately few public appeals, figures show. Charity Missing People says many black families feel their missing loved ones are not seen as a high enough priority. It has now launched a survey in order to report experiences back to the police. The charity added that both in the police response and the media reaction, black families often felt neglected. Between 2019 and 20 in England and Wales, black people accounted for 14% of missing person cases, whilst making up 3% of the general population, National Crime Agency data shows. During the same period, white people accounted for 61% of missing person publicity appeals, whilst 22% were for missing black people. The article goes on to talk about Richard Okorigei, who went missing in Ladbroke Grove, West London on the 22nd of March 2021. Richard's mother criticised the initial police response to her son's disappearance and said the police did not take her concern seriously despite Richard's health risk from sickle cell disease. She said the response was very different to the urgency seen in the hunt for Sarah Everard less than 3 weeks before. Her Sarah Everard case was flooded all over the newspapers and the police took immediate action. We cannot compare the 2 cases. Richard was just Richard. He was just a black child, a black boy, she said. Miss Giles said that when she reported her son missing, a police officer replied, "If you can't find your son, how do you expect the police officers to find your son? Well, I mean, is that not your job?" On the case of Sarah Everard, which triggered national outrage and even called for the protection of women, was interesting to say the least. A year prior, sisters Nicole Smallman and Bieber Henry were murdered, and it took an entire year for the police to find the killer. To make matters worse, the officers that were sent to investigate the crime scene sent images of the dead bodies of the 2 young women in a group WhatsApp chat. Let's talk about Blessing Olusegun, the 21-year-old student who was reported missing on the 18th of February, was later found dead on a beach. It was ruled an accident, however Blessing's family and friends say otherwise. What gets me about this case specifically is that Blessing and I share a lot of similarities. She's from South London, like me. She was in her early 20s, like me. She's a British African, like me. And she definitely looks like somebody that would be a part of my inner circle. A post-mortem concluded that her death was a result of accidental drowning, and I watched a documentary about Blessing's death and disappearance, and they mentioned that a day after her body was found on the beach, the police didn't put any tape on the beach to indicate that something serious had taken place, which I thought was very questionable. It's clear that black women, men and children are neglected when talking about missing people cases. I personally think that one solution would be to make more missing people charities that cover cases that involve black women, children and men, because since we can't rely on mainstream media, we'll just have to take matters into our own hands. And you know me, I'm all for black people creating our own spaces instead of relying on our oppressors to do so. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you've got something from this video, and in the comment section below I've put the link down to a website called missingblackpeople.com, which aims to raise awareness of appeals for missing black people in the UK. So if you do want to do your own research in your own time, then have a look. They still need to update the appeals page, but I do think it's a step in the right direction. Thank you for listening, and again, if you've got something from this video, please don't forget to share this video. So